The lock was already broken. That was the first thing James noticed. Not frozen, not rusted, broken. The metal hung loose, swaying slightly as the wind slammed into the side of the boat. Snow rushed past his boots in frantic spirals, stinging his skin, screaming through the darkness like it was trying to warn him away. His breath came out uneven, thick clouds swallowed instantly by the storm. He stood there longer than he should have. Something in his chest tightened. Not fear, not curiosity. Recognition. James pushed the door open. The smell hit him first. Damp wool, cold air, something faintly human. His eyes adjusted slowly, reluctantly, as if they didn't want to see what waited inside. Two bundles lay on the floor, perfectly still. The world seemed to pause. Even the wind hesitated. His heart began to pound so hard it hurt. For one terrible second, he thought they were already gone, that he had arrived too late, that the lake had finally crossed a line it couldn't uncross. Then one bundle moved, just enough. Tiny breath escaped, fragile, uneven, like a question the night had no answer for. James dropped to his knees. His hands shook as he reached out, fingers numb, clumsy, afraid. He pulled back the edge of the blanket and saw a small face, flushed and pale at the same time, lips trembling, lashes dusted with snow that had somehow found its way inside. Alive. Beside her. The second bundle stirred. Pair of dark eyes opened, wide, watchful, far too aware for a child so small. Those eyes didn't cry. They didn't blink. They stared straight into him. James sucked in a breath that scraped his lungs raw. No, he whispered, not in refusal, but disbelief. There was no basket, no note, no tracks in the snow, only the two of them. And him. He gathered them up without thinking, one arm around each tiny body, pulling them against his chest. They were cold, too cold. Their small tremors bled straight through his coat, into his bones. "Stay," he murmured, his voice breaking. "Just stay." The walk back blurred together. Snow, darkness, the sound of his own heartbeat roaring in his ears. The house door slammed shut behind him, sealing the night outside like a held breath. Finally released. Fire, blankets, warmth. Time lost its shape. When he finally sat down, the children were asleep, pressed together on the bed, their breaths shallow but steady. James didn't move. He just watched, afraid that if he looked away, they might disappear. The room felt different. He felt different. Outside, the storm began to quiet, as if satisfied. James rested his elbows on his knees, his hands covering his face. His shoulders shook once, just once, before he forced himself still. He didn't ask who they were. He didn't ask why. He only whispered into the dim, flickering light, "All right, I won't turn away." Somewhere beneath the ice, the lake creaked softly. Waiting. James believed that night ended when the storm passed. He didn't know it had only just begun, and that one day someone would come asking for what the lake had left behind. Morning came quietly, not gently, quietly. Light crept through the thin curtains like it wasn't sure it belonged there. The storm had moved on, leaving behind a world scrubbed raw and silent. James sat at the small kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold long ago. He hadn't slept. He hadn't even tried. Every few seconds, his eyes drifted to the doorway. The room beyond it breathed. Soft, uneven, real. He stood, joints stiff, and crossed the narrow hall. The bed looked smaller than it had the night before, crowded by two tiny bodies bundled together, as if they'd already learned something about survival. One of them, the girl, had kicked free of the blanket. Her foot twitched, searching for warmth. James tucked it back in. The boy's eyes were open, not startled, not confused. Watching. James froze, their gazes locked. Something about the way the child looked at him made his throat tighten. Not fear, not accusation, but awareness. Like the boy was taking inventory of the world and deciding whether it was safe. "You're still here," James murmured. Unsure why he needed to say it out loud, the boy blinked once. That was all. James stepped back slowly, as if sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile agreement had formed between them. He busied himself with small things, boiling water, rinsing a cup, wiping a counter that was already clean. He didn't know what to do with hands that had spent years only answering to routine. By noon, the house felt fuller, not louder, fuller. The floor creaked under unfamiliar weight. The air smelled faintly of warm milk and something old memory, maybe. James moved through the hours carefully, as though each decision carried consequences he couldn't yet see. Knock came just after midday. Sharp, unexpected. James's heart jumped. He wiped his hands on his trousers and opened the door just enough to see who stood on the other side. Mrs. Callan from down the road, a basket tucked into the crook of her arm. Her eyes flicked past him, quick, curious, before settling back on his face. "Storm was a bad one," she said. "Thought I'd check." James nodded. "I'm fine." Her gaze lingered, sharp now. "Heard noises early. Thought you might have had trouble." "No trouble," he replied. A little too quickly. Silence stretched. Then, faint, unmistakable, a sound drifted from inside the house. A soft, thin cry. Mrs. Callan's eyebrows lifted. James didn't move, didn't explain, didn't apologize. He simply opened the door wider. She stepped inside slowly. One look toward the bedroom, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh," she breathed. James watched her reaction carefully. He expected questions, demands. Panicked. Instead, she looked at him, really looked, and something softened. "They alive?" she asked. "Yes." "That's good," she said after a moment. "That's very good." She set the basket down without another word. "Eggs, red, a folded blanket on top. I won't ask," she added, pulling on her gloves. "But you should know. People will notice." James nodded. "I know." She paused at the door. "You need anything?" He thought of 1,000 answers, then said, "No." When she left, the house felt smaller again, quieter, but the quiet had teeth now. It pressed in on him, heavy with the weight of being seen. By evening, the boy cried harder. The girl followed. James sat on the edge of the bed, one in each arm, rocking clumsily, whispering words that didn't matter just to keep his voice steady. Outside, the lake groaned, a low, distant sound like something shifting beneath the surface. James stared at the dark window. He didn't know how long he could hold this. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But as the cries softened and two small bodies relaxed against his chest, one truth settled deep and immovable. Whatever had been left with him had already changed the rules. By nightfall, Havenwood knew something had happened. And somewhere beyond the lake, something or someone had begun to remember what was lost. The first name slipped out by accident. James didn't plan it. It wasn't chosen or discussed or weighed the way important things usually are. It happened in the quiet, in the space between one breath and the next, when the girl's cry sharpened into something panicked and desperate. "Easy. Easy, Scarlet," he murmured. The sound of it surprised him. Scarlet. He froze, waiting for the world to object. It didn't. The girl's fists loosened. Her cry softened into a hiccuping breath, then silence. Her lashes fluttered, and she settled against his chest, as if the name had been waiting for her all along. James swallowed. The boy watched. Always watching. "You don't get left out," James said quietly, shifting his weight. His voice came rougher this time, like it was passing through something old and tight in his chest. "You need a name, too." The boy didn't cry, didn't fuss. He just studied James with those steady, unblinking eyes. Benjamin. The name landed heavy, and sure James exhaled. That night, the house accepted them. It wasn't a grand moment. No sign, no thunder, just the quiet settling of routines, bending, stretching, reshaping themselves around two new lives. The stove burned longer. The lamp stayed lit later. The clock on the wall marked time differently now, not in hours, but in breaths, cries, and the soft rustle of blankets. Days passed. Then more. James stopped counting. People came, they always did. Some knocked, some didn't. They brought questions disguised as concern, casseroles disguised as kindness. James answered with nods, shrugs, and a steady refusal to explain. "They're mine," was all he ever said. Some accepted it. Some didn't, but no one pushed too hard. Not yet. Scarlet grew loud, hungry, demanding. Her cries filled the house, sharp and insistent, as if she were trying to make up for the silence she'd arrived in. Benjamin remained quiet. He tracked movement, sound, people. He seemed to catalog the world, filing things away carefully, already suspicious of how easily it could disappear. James noticed at night, when the wind rattled the windows and the lake groaned under the ice, the boy's eyes would snap open. His small body stiffened, breath hitching. James would sit up, press a hand to his back, steady and firm. "It's all right," he'd whisper, not knowing if it was true. "You're here." The words became a ritual. Weeks passed. Then months. Spring crept in slowly, cautiously, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. Snow thinned. Ice cracked. The lake sighed and shifted, shedding its grip on winter. James built a cradle from old boards he'd meant to throw away. He hung a swing from the tree out front. Even though the children were far too small to use it. It made the house look hopeful. The town noticed that too. "Temporary," someone said once. "He's old," said another. "It won't last." James heard it all. He ignored it all. Time moved the way time always does, without permission. Years folded in on themselves. Scarlet learned to walk by, falling, loudly, repeatedly. She laughed every time she hit the floor, stubborn and fearless. Benjamin learned by watching. He took his first steps only after he was sure he wouldn't fail. James aged quietly in the background, his hands rougher, his back slower, his eyes sharper. He watched them grow with a mixture of awe and dread. Every milestone felt like a victory and a warning. Questions came eventually. They always do. Scarlet asked first, her voice casual, almost careless. "Why don't we have pictures like other kids?" James hesitated. Just a breath too long. "We lost some things," he said. Benjamin didn't ask. He simply listened. That night, after they slept, James sat at the table and stared at his hands. He realized then that love didn't erase the past, that it only delayed it. Somewhere deep in the house, a floorboard creaked, the same one that had creaked the night he brought them home. James looked toward the sound, a chill settling in his bones. That had nothing to do with age. He had given them names. He had given them a life, but he had never been given the right to forget where they came from. Names can anchor a soul, but they can also summon ghosts. And one day, the past would remember the names James chose not to ask. The questions didn't arrive all at once. They seeped in slowly, like water finding its way through cracks in ice. Quiet, persistent, impossible to stop. Scarlet grew into noise. Her laughter filled the house, loud and unfiltered. She spoke with her hands, with her whole body, with the kind of confidence that comes from never doubting you are wanted. She challenged James openly. Why this rule? Why that road? Why can't I stay out longer? and argued like she expected to win. Benjamin grew into silence. He listened before speaking. He watched people when they thought no one was watching them. He noticed which adults smiled too quickly, which ones avoided certain topics, which ones went quiet when he entered a room. James watched them both and worried, not because they were unhappy. They weren't, but because happiness has a way of sharpening curiosity. And curiosity, once awake, does not return to sleep easily. The first real crack came on a night when the lake was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that makes you uneasy without knowing why. They were eating dinner, fish, potatoes, bread, the kind of meal that felt like home. Scarlett was talking, as usual, telling a story about school, exaggerating everything for effect. Benjamin ate quietly, eyes flicking between his plate and James's face. Then he spoke. "Why do we have different last names than everyone else?" The fork in James's hand stopped mid-air. Scarlett froze too, surprised, not by the question, but by who asked it. James set the fork down slowly. His heartbeat filled his ears. "Names change," he said carefully. "People choose them. Sometimes they're given." Benjamin nodded. He seemed satisfied. Scarlett wasn't. Given by who? She pressed. James met her gaze. For a second, he almost told the truth, or at least part of it. But the words tangled inside him, heavy and dangerous. "My life," he said instead. She rolled her eyes. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." She laughed it off, but something shifted. A thin line appeared where certainty had been. That night, James couldn't sleep. He sat at the table long after the lamp burned low, staring at an old wooden box tucked beneath the floorboard. He hadn't opened it in years. Inside it lay the things he never spoke about. The blankets, the cross, the weight of a moment he'd chosen not to question. He didn't touch it. Yet. Time pressed on. 16 came like a storm. Scarlett stood taller now, sharper, fire in her eyes. She asked questions without fear, without apology. She challenged the world and expected it to answer back. Benjamin stayed quiet, but his silence had changed. It wasn't passive anymore. It was guarded. On Scarlett's birthday, she didn't wait. "They say you found us," she said, standing in the doorway, arms crossed. "In the boat?" James looked up slowly. "Yes." That was all. No story. No defense. Just the truth stripped bare. The silence that followed was heavier than any lie. Benjamin watched James carefully, like he was seeing him for the first time. Scarlett searched his face, looking for cracks, for weakness, for something she could push against. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. James's voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. "Because some truths don't help you grow. They only make you look backward." Scarlett didn't argue. She just nodded once, sharp and tight. That night, the house felt different. The walls listened. The floorboards remembered. James lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight in his chest pressing harder than it ever had before. He knew then that time was no longer on his side, that whatever he'd been protecting them from was no longer. Just outside the door. It was already inside. And it was learning how to speak. Some truths wait patiently for the right age. And when they arise, they don't ask permission. They demand reckoning. The envelope didn't belong there. That was the first thing James thought when he saw it resting on the porch railing, thick, clean, untouched by wind or dust. No stamp, no return address. Just paper where paper shouldn't be. The lake was calm behind it. Too calm. James stood there longer than necessary, his fingers hovering inches above the envelope as if it might burn him. The air felt tight, charged, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. He picked it up. The weight surprised him. Not heavy with paper, heavy with intention. Inside the house, Scarlett laughed at something Benjamin said. The sound cut through James sharper than any blade. He almost put the envelope back down, almost walked away, but the past doesn't loosen its grip when ignored. He opened it. Q one sentence. That was all. They are ours. We are coming back. The room tilted. James sat down hard on the chair, the paper trembling in his hands. 18 years collapsed into that single line. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every quiet promise he'd made without witnesses. Scarlett noticed first. What is it? She asked, already moving toward him. James didn't answer. He didn't trust his voice. Benjamin took the letter gently and read it once. Then again. His jaw tightened, just barely. Scarlett read it last. She didn't react right away. No anger. No fear. Just stillness. Who? She asked. James stared at the floor, at the lines worn into the wood by time and footsteps. For the first time since that night on the lake, he felt truly old. I don't know, he said finally. Not for certain. Benjamin's voice was quiet, but firm. You know enough. James closed his eyes. Yes. The word landed like a confession. The day unraveled after that. No one ate. No one argued. The house held its breath, waiting. Scarlett paced. Benjamin disappeared to the shoreline, throwing stones into the water, counting the ripples until they vanished. At night, Scarlett stood in front of James. If you know something, she said, you tell us. Not because you owe us, but because we are your family. James looked at her, really looked, and saw how much she had grown. Saw the fire, the strength, the way she no longer needed protection so much as truth. When I found you, he said slowly, there was nothing. No note, no tracks. Just you and the lake. Why didn't you report it? I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid they'd take you. Afraid I'd be alone again. Benjamin swallowed. Scarlett nodded. And now? James held up the letter. Now the fear has a name. A week later, the sound came. Low. Deep. Unfamiliar. An engine. Scarlett saw it first. A black SUV sliding into view like a shadow made solid. It didn't belong to Havenwood. It gleamed where nothing else did. The vehicle stopped. Two doors opened. A man stepped out first. Tall, controlled. A woman followed. Her posture stiff, her expression closed. James felt it in his bones. The past had arrived. Some doors opened quietly. Others arrive with engines, lawyers, and demands, and they never leave things the way they found them. They didn't wait to be invited. The man knocked once, firm, practiced, then stepped inside as if the house already belonged to him. The woman followed, her eyes scanning the room with polite disapproval, taking in the worn furniture, the low ceiling, the faint smell of wood smoke and lake water. James stood. Slowly. Every joint protested, but pride held him upright. I'm Michael, the man said. His voice was smooth, trained. This is Elizabeth. She nodded, but didn't smile. We've come for our children. The words landed clean and cold, like a document sliding across a desk. Scarlett stepped forward before James could speak. You don't get to say that like it's simple. Michael's gaze softened, just enough to appear sincere. We know this is difficult. Benjamin said nothing. He stood near the wall, watching, listening, filing everything away. James gestured toward the table. Sit. They didn't. We left them here for their safety, Michael continued. There were circumstances, threats. We chose you because you were invisible. James felt something inside him snap, not loudly, but completely. You abandoned them, he said quietly. Elizabeth finally spoke. Her voice was clipped, precise. We ensured they survived. That was the priority. And now? Scarlett demanded. Now, Michael said, they come home. Home? Scarlett laughed once, sharp, humorless. You don't even know who we are. Michael opened a folder. Papers, documents, proof. Biology knows, he said. Benjamin stepped forward then. So does time. Elizabeth's eyes flicked to him, evaluating. We can offer you opportunities this place can't. Education, security, a future. James turned away. He went to the stove, added a log, his hands shaking despite himself. A future built on what? He asked. Fear? Silence? Michael's jaw tightened. We didn't come to debate feelings. Scarlett's voice trembled, not weak, but furious. You don't get to erase 18 years with paperwork. We're not erasing anything, Elizabeth said coolly. We're correcting it. Benjamin felt the room close in. The air thickened. Every word felt like a line being drawn. We'll give you time, Michael said, closing the folder. But understand this. Legally, we have every right. James faced them again. And morally? Silence. The kind that answers without speaking. They left as abruptly as they'd arrived. The SUV rolled away, taking its shine with it, leaving only ruts in the snow dot inside. The house felt smaller. Scarlett paced. Benjamin stared at the door. James sank into a chair. I won't stop you, he said finally, his voice breaking. Whatever you choose? I won't stop you? Scarlett spun toward him. Don't say that. Benjamin swallowed hard. The choice had been placed between them. Not by love, but by blood. And blood was impatient. The law had spoken. No, it was the heart's turn. And one of them would not survive the decision. Unchanged. The lake was awake, not restless. Awake. Moonlight stretched across its surface like a scar, pale and unforgiving. The wind barely moved, yet the water shifted in slow, deliberate breaths, as if it remembered something it had been holding for years. James stood at the shoreline alone. The old boat rocked gently against the dock, the same one he had sworn he'd never touch again. His hands shook as he untied the rope. Age had taken his strength, but not his resolve. Behind him, footsteps crunched softly. He didn't turn. I knew you'd be here, Benjamin said. James nodded once. I wanted to say goodbye without making it heavy. Benjamin stepped closer. You're running. James smiled faintly. I'm making room. They stood together in silence. Then another set of footsteps. Scarlett. Her eyes were red, but her spine was straight. We're not leaving, she said. James turned then, his breath catching. You don't have to prove anything. We already did, she replied. Every day. Benjamin reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope, the one sentence that had tried to erase a lifetime. Michael and Elizabeth arrived moments later, headlights cutting through the dark. This is unnecessary, Michael said, stepping forward. We can resolve this like adults. Scarlett stepped between him and James. We did. 18 years ago. You just didn't stay. Elizabeth's composure cracked. You don't understand what it cost us. James's voice was calm now. You don't understand what it cost them. Benjamin handed Michael the envelope, unopened. You don't get to reclaim what you never returned for. Silence. Then Elizabeth spoke, her voice small. We thought distance would protect them. It didn't, Scarlett said. He did. The lake groaned softly, ice shifting far out in the dark. The same sound from the night. Everything began. James finally spoke the truth he'd carried alone. They were left in the boat. No note, no promise. Just hope someone would care. Elizabeth covered her mouth. Michael's shoulders sagged. Scarlett stepped forward, voice steady. We choose him. Benjamin nodded. We already did. The law followed love that night, not because it had to, but because it could not deny 18 years of proof. James didn't leave. He stayed, and the lake having taken nothing from him after all, finally let the past rest. Family is not defined by blood alone, but by who stays when staying costs everything. Love is not proven by claiming, but by choosing every single day.